Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into a case that's, it's going to leave you scratching your head. It's the death of Deina Buff Jones, a police officer on Baldhead Island, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. This one is, it's definitely got some twists and turns.
That's for sure. And to help us kind of like untangle this whole thing, we're looking at an episode from Crime Junkie. They always do a great job laying things out.
Yeah, Crime Junkie, definitely. And this case, man, it's a wild ride from beginning to end.
So to kind of set the stage, Baldhead Island, it's not your typical crime scene.
Right.
It's this tiny little island off the coast of North Carolina. Very, very wealthy, very exclusive. Only way to get there is by ferry.
Yeah, you're not going to stumble upon Baldhead Island, you know? It's a place people go to get away from it all, kind of like a little slice of paradise.
Right, and that's what makes this whole thing even more bizarre. You've got this idyllic setting, and then bam, you have this young police officer found dead under really mysterious circumstances.
Yeah, Deina Buff Jones, or Dee, as she was known to everyone. It's a tragedy that's just shrouded in unanswered questions.
Absolutely, and one of the first things that really jumps out at you is this cryptic radio message that Dee sent out right before she died. Something about 3 people and a gun.
Yeah, that radio transmission, it's chilling. It's like something straight out of a movie, and it's just stuck with everyone ever since. Like, who were these 3 people? What did they have to do with Dee's death?
It's like a giant question mark hanging over the whole case.
Yeah.
And then there's Dee herself.
Yeah.
Right? She was known for being a very by-the-book kind of cop, not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
Oh, yeah. Dee was definitely a stickler for the rules. And that might have made her some enemies, especially in a place like Baldhead Island.
So we've got a cryptic radio message, a young officer who wasn't afraid to step on some toes. What exactly happened on the night of Dee's death?
Well, the official story goes that she and her partner were responding to a call about a missing golf cart. Kind of a routine thing.
Missing golf cart?
Oh.
That seems a little strange, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it does make you wonder, why send 2 officers for something like that?
Right. It's not exactly a high priority call.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they go to check out this missing golf cart, and then what?
Well, a short time later, Dee's partner finds her dead by the Baldhead Lighthouse single gunshot wound to the back of her head.
The back of her head. That doesn't sound like suicide.
No, it definitely raises some red flags.
Yeah.
And then it gets even more complicated when you start looking at how the crime scene was handled.
Yeah, I've heard about this. The crime scene was a complete mess, right?
Yeah, it was chaos, really. They removed Dee's body before they really examined the area. Her partner moved her gun for some reason. And then, get this, they hosed down the entire crime scene.
Hosed it down?
Yeah.
Are you serious? What was the reason for that?
Some say it was just incompetence, like a bunch of mistakes made by officers who didn't really know what they were doing. But others think there was something more sinister going on. Like maybe someone was trying to cover their tracks.
And I think I read somewhere that they hosed down the crime scene because there was like a big fancy wedding happening nearby.
Yeah, that's right. Apparently a high-profile wedding needed to go on as scheduled, so they just washed away any potential evidence.
Wow. Can't make this stuff up. So we've got a chaotic crime scene, a gunshot wound that doesn't seem to add up, and rumors of a cover-up.
Yeah.
What did the authorities ultimately conclude about Dee's death?
Well, despite all the strange stuff we just talked about, they ruled it a suicide.
Suicide, really? With all those red flags? Like gunshot at the back of the head and that whole mess with the crime scene?
I know, it's hard to believe, right? But that's what they said. They pointed to some personal issues Dee was dealing with, and there was an ex-boyfriend who claimed that she had mentioned hurting herself a few weeks earlier.
An ex-boyfriend. Were there any other people the investigators looked into?
Oh, yeah, there were a few. One was another ex-boyfriend named William Hewitt. And this is where it gets interesting. He was an agent with the SBI, the State Bureau of Investigation.
Hold on. An SBI agent? That's a pretty big deal. What was his story?
Well, he had a kind of shaky alibi for that night. And there were some rumors going around that Dee might have had some dirt on him. Something that could have messed up his career.
Wow, so maybe a motive there? Does anything come of that?
Not really. The investigation into Hewitt kind of went nowhere fast. It's like they hit a dead end.
So we've got 2 ex-boyfriends, both with potential motives,
Yeah.
but no charges. Were there any other suspects?
Yeah, there was one more guy, Scott Monzon, another ex. He told the police that Dee had been acting weird in the days before her death, but nothing specific enough to make him a real suspect.
Okay, so 2 exes, and what about this weird stuff Monzon mentioned?
It was all pretty vague, you
Right.
know, like she was withdrawn or acting out of character, that kind of thing.
I see. So 3 ex-boyfriends. But the investigation didn't really go anywhere with any of them. Was there anyone else on their radar?
Actually, there was one more person they looked into, Michael Vento. He was an EMS worker, and Dee had filed a sexual harassment complaint against him.
Oh, wow. A sexual harassment complaint. That could definitely be a motive, right?
You would think so, right? Like maybe he wanted revenge or something.
Yeah.
But again, the investigation didn't get very far with this lead either. It's like every time they got close to something, it just fizzled out.
It's almost like they weren't really trying that hard to find out what happened. Like they'd already made up their minds that it was suicide.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way about this case. Like, certain things weren't investigated thoroughly enough. Like, maybe some people weren't as cooperative as they should have been. And then you throw in the whole crime scene debacle, and it's no wonder people have doubts.
Especially Dee's family. I can't even imagine what they must have gone through. First losing her and then having her death ruled as suicide. How did they react to all of this?
They never believed it, not for a second. They were convinced that something terrible had happened to Dee and that someone was trying to cover it up. And they were determined to get justice for her.
Good for them. It sounds like they weren't going to let this just fade away. What did they do?
They fought like hell to get the case reopened. And they actually succeeded. They refused to give up. They knew something was wrong.
It's amazing how much a determined family can accomplish when they refuse to back down. What specific steps did they take to get the case re-examined?
One of the big things was they went after death benefits for Dee. Those are usually only given if an officer dies in the line of duty. So by pushing for this, they basically forced the authorities to take a closer look at what really happened to Dee.
That's really smart, using the system to make them reevaluate their own findings. So what happened during those hearings?
They brought in some outside experts to testify, people who specialize in things like gunshot wounds and crime scene investigation. And these experts basically poked holes in the whole suicide theory.
So they were challenging the official narrative head on. Did that have any effect?
Oh yeah, big time. These experts pointed out how difficult it would be to self-inflict a gunshot wound to the back of the head. And they also raised serious concerns about the way the crime scene had been handled, saying that it made it practically impossible to determine what really happened.
Wow, so they were really chipping away at the official story piece by piece. Did they actually manage to overturn the suicide ruling?
They didn't completely overturn it, but they did get it changed to undetermined, which was a huge victory.
Undetermined. So they couldn't just call it suicide anymore. That's a big step. What happened after that? Did they finally reopen the case?
It did eventually, but it took some time. A new district attorney came in, a guy named John David, and he was the one who decided to reopen the case in 2012. He brought in a team of retired FBI agents to take a fresh look at everything.
A whole team of FBI agents.
Wow.
That must give Dee's family some hope that they might finally get some answers.
Yeah, it was a big development.
Yeah.
These agents had no connection to the case or the island, so they were coming at it with fresh eyes and years of experience.
That's what they needed. Someone to look at all the evidence without any preconceived notions. So what did these FBI agents find?
Well, even with all their expertise, they couldn't agree on what happened. Some of them thought it was suicide, but others thought there was enough evidence to suggest foul play. Can you believe that? Even experienced investigators couldn't figure it out.
It just goes to show how complicated this whole thing is.
Meh.
But even if they couldn't agree on a conclusion, they must have uncovered something new, right? Some new piece of evidence or a new lead.
They looked at everything again, all the old evidence, the witness statements. They even investigated some of the rumors that were floating around, like the one about Dee being involved in a big drug investigation on the island.
A drug investigation? Now that's interesting. What was that all about?
Well, there was this talk about Dee uncovering something big, something that some powerful people on the island wanted to keep quiet. But nobody really knows for sure what she was working on or who might have been involved.
So even with the FBI on the case, we're still left with a lot of unanswered questions. It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real mystery. And sadly, it's still unresolved. Officially, the case is open, but it's inactive. No one's been arrested, and Dee's family is still waiting for answers.
That's heartbreaking. They've fought so hard for justice, and they're still waiting. It makes you realize how many cases like this there must be out there. Cases that just slip through the cracks and never get solved.
It's a reminder that even in a place as beautiful as Baldhead Island, things aren't always what they seem. And it shows how important it is to hold people accountable, to demand answers, and to never give up on the search for the truth.
Well said. It's been a really eye-opening deep dive, and it leaves us with a lot to think about. What do you think out there? Do you lean toward suicide or murder? Or are you somewhere in between, lost in the fog of unanswered questions? Thanks for joining us.